Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Rosenberg, Global Partner and President of Consumer Brands at Allison Worldwide, and I want to welcome you all to today's discussion, where we'll be taking a look back at the Paris Olympics and a leap forwards to the 2028 Games in Los Angeles. So, the Paris Summer Olympics was really a revelation in many regards. There were more eyeballs, more platforms, more engagement, more opportunities for brands. The result was an incredibly positive cultural experience that brought us all together, I think, in ways none of us have seen in many years. As LA 28 now looms on the horizon, we're going to explore today which brands won the Paris Olympics and why, and trends we see in partnering with the Olympics platform moving forward. We are joined today by an amazing group of women, each bringing a unique perspective to today's discussion. I'm going to introduce our panelists, and then I'm going to ask them to just give a little bit background and share an overview of their experience. So with me is Jacie deHoop, co-founder of The Gist, Pallavi Kumar, her senior professorial lecturer from American University School of Communication, and the faculty director of SOC3, a Gen Z integrated creative agency with clients including the Home Depot, Aldi, and Expedia, and then Alisa Gmelich, the CMO from Sprouts Farmers Market. So, Jacie, let's start with you.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. It's so great to be here today. As mentioned, I'm Jacie. I'm one of the co-founders of The Gist. For anyone who's not familiar with The Gist, we are a fan-first sports media brand. We are all about leveling the playing field in sports by serving female fans. And so we do that through equal coverage in our newsletter, across our social channels, in our podcast, equal coverage of women's and men's sports. We put them on that level playing field. And we also have an entirely female identifying content team. So all the content that we create is really by and for female fans. And from that female voice, from that female perspective that we felt was really missing in the sports landscape. For just a sense of kind of the Gist journey. We've been around for 7 years. We actually just announced this week that we surpassed 1 million newsletter subscribers. We have a really large and engaged email newsletter list. That's the main way that we communicate with our Gisters. And my role at The Gist is really all things partnerships. So we work with leagues, teams, and brand partners to really bring amazing content to our audience of female fans. Some of our biggest partners include Nike, Adidas, State Farm. We work with all kinds of women's and men's leagues like the WNBA, NBA, PWHL, a lot of the emerging leagues that I know we will be talking about in this discussion too, as it relates to the Olympics. I'm super excited to be here today. With our space, the Olympics is just huge. It's really a tentpole and a moment that brings new fans into the world of sports like nothing else. And so Paris was amazing for us at The Gist, a huge tentpole for us, and LA is going to be even bigger. So thank you for having me today.
Absolutely. And Pallavi, we'll head over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Pallavi Kumar, and I am a professor at American University. I'm also a former agency person, so I traded my I traded my clients for students, and I've been teaching for 22 years, and the focus is public relations and strategic communication. And actually, I'm so excited about being on this panel because the opening topic for my campaigns class this semester was the Olympics, of course, so I'm excited to dive in. The other thing that I do at American is I launched 2 years ago SOC3, which is a creative integrated agency where students get credit and they get paid, and we have had 7 clients so far, including the Home Depot. Our paying clients have been the Home Depot, Aldi, and this semester Expedia. We also work with pro bono clients like the League of Women Voters and the Washington English Center. And I encourage everybody to follow us on Instagram at SOC3Change and also check out our website. The goal of SOC3 is to help diversify the communications industry. And every cohort, we're on our 5th cohort, every cohort has been more than 50% diverse. So check us out, and if you want to hire us, hire us. Not to take away from Allison. Sorry, we're we're not.
That's okay. There's room for us all. And Alisa?
Awesome. Hi, everybody. So great to meet all of you. My name is Alisa Gmelich, and I am the Chief Marketing Officer for Sprouts Farmers Market. And for those that are not familiar with Sprouts, we are the fastest growing health and wellness retailer in the US to start. We've got over 400 locations across what we call the Smile of America. So if you start up in Washington and go sort of down the south side through California, which is one of our biggest markets, through Arizona. And then we are really starting to build from Florida up through the Northeast. I have to say, I'm so proud to be working on this amazing brand. We are seeing some incredible and tremendous growth at Sprouts. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we are completely laser focused on who our customer is, which are really the folks that are more health focused and people that are just looking for higher quality across the board. A lot of what we do is we create a lot of joy within our shopping experience because what we represent is a very differentiated assortment and just a really different experience to normal grocery shopping. A lot of what we sell you can't find in other places. And so we have really sort of carved a niche for ourselves that creates kind of a secondary shop, especially if you're looking for things that are attribute driven. We are experts in the space of gluten-free, grass-fed, paleo, keto, plant-based, vegan, all of those things that we know have been growing tremendously are areas where we just have some incredible group of people that are incredibly knowledgeable. And so what they do is they really forage to bring these things to life inside our stores. The other area that I'm incredibly proud of with Sprouts is last year we launched our Powered by Sprouts platform. And really, this is a platform dedicated to women's wellness. And the way we sort of showcase that is through our sponsorships and partnerships with organizations like the SEC and the Big 12. And we really focus all of our efforts around women's performance. And so that's why this is a pretty interesting space, for us to be thinking about as we think about the LA, the LA 28. We think that there are going to be some pretty great opportunities for us there.
Awesome. Thank you all for the background on each of you. Just a little housekeeping before we dive in. We're going to take questions towards the end of the hour. If you have any as we're going through the session, please pop them into the chat. So let's dive in. Beautiful vista in front of you. And as I wrote about last week in The Roar, which is a bi-weekly newsletter that I put out on LinkedIn, even though we're just about 2 months since 2 months sort of post Olympics, I still feel like a lot of what we saw in Paris is fresh. The details still permeate in my mind. And I keep replaying the opening ceremonies where Louis Vuitton was contextually woven into the storytelling with the history of Paris and the history of France. And then there was Charmin, which gave US track and field star Kendall Ellis a big virtual hug when she nearly missed her race at the trials while stuck in a porta potty, which is a very interesting story. But of course, there were Skims and Ralph Lauren who killed it with amazing, beautiful apparel for Team USA. But I think more than anything, I was struck by the handoff at the closing ceremonies between Paris and Los Angeles, between Tom Cruise rescuing the torch and lots of talk about him doing all this for free in his own stunt work as an aside, but then handing it off to Los Angeles, where Dre and Snoop immediately hosted a performance on the shores of Long Beach. It almost felt like LA 28 was starting before the paint had even dried on Paris. And I think that was no accident. We're going to get to this and all and more over the next 45 minutes, but I wanted to just take a moment and sort of frame things out for us. LA 28 is 4 years away, but the host committee appears to be approaching the marketing of it in a way that it feels like we are already in an Olympic cycle. I started getting push notifications on my social channels offering me the opportunity to sign up early for early access to tickets. And you're starting to see offers for different events at the LA Games and in LA. And with Casey Wasserman at the helm of sort of the LA 28 hype machine, I think brands who are even considering how they might tap in to the cultural zeitgeist in 4 years need to start planning and in some cases activating now. So that's sort of the backdrop for today's conversation. And I want to start by taking a quick peek back at Paris to see what key learnings we can extract from it. So I'm going to get us started broadly with a question for the group that really looks at what was your favorite moment from the Paris Games and why. And I'm not asking you to comment on like your favorite brand moment. We'll get to that. Let's just talk about it as a fan of the Olympics. What really spoke to you? Alisa, can you kick us off?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So I think first things first, I think what was interesting for me is how the Olympics were going to show up. If we think back to the last time there was a Summer Olympics that people were really rallied around, honestly, it was 2018. We had this huge pandemic, and if I rewind back in time, we were supposed to have a Summer Olympics in 2020. It got punted to 2021. I think we can all agree, still very much in the middle of the pandemic where we kind of, I don't want to say got through it. I think we did the best that we could, but it was not the event that it was. And so now you fast forward to Paris where we're like, okay, finally we get an opportunity to do this. In the meantime, there's a lot that's changed. The world has changed. The United States has changed. And I will say all of the ways to access the content of the Olympics has changed a lot in 6 years. I think these lines between culture, brand, and just the Olympic spirit, there are some interesting blurred lines on how all of those things come together. But there were really three things that stood out to me. I think first, number one, Paris took a very different approach at the opening ceremonies. I think that was first and foremost. And I have to say, you saw some people loved it, some people sort of missed the tradition of it. I personally thought it was tremendous. They embraced the city and it was really a celebration of Paris across the board. The second was, I feel like more than ever, the Paralympics it was finally a moment. The Paralympics are finally not just sort of this side thing that happens. It is something that I think people are watching and they are really engaging in. In my opinion, whoever did the social media account for the Paralympics did a tremendous, tremendous job finding the balance between these heartwarming, unbelievable stories of strength and also bringing some humor into it as well, which I think makes it even more approachable. And then the third was just the access to the Olympic experience. I know for me, I love seeing sort of the behind the scenes look at where the athletes are staying, what their rooms look like, what they're eating, what the Olympic Village is like, how the coaches are interacting with them. So those to me were the three things that sort of made, in addition to the great competition, I love seeing sort of this new aspect of the Olympics taking hold.
Super. Pallavi?
So for me, when I think about like who won and why, it's such a broad question, but leading up to the Olympics, I was getting like this Titanic feeling. I don't know, I'm going to date myself a little bit, but when the movie Titanic was being filmed, everything leading up was terrible press, right? It's overrun, it's over budget, it's too expensive, it's going to flop. All of these things. And if you think about the Paris Olympics, it felt very similar, right? The Seine is polluted. How are people going to be able to swim in there? You have this very contentious election in France. You have these strikes happening. You have, the Parisians themselves that are like, I don't want to go here. I'm fleeing. Like this is, beneath us. Why are they putting rings on the Eiffel Tower? I mean, there was just so much sort of bad press. And even the opening ceremony was like the rain, like pouring down. And you're like, oh, this is not going to go well, right? So to me, the whole thing is the triumph, right, that happened, because then all those pieces that made the Olympics so special, right, the brand sponsorships, which we'll get into, but all those viral moments that felt like people were part of the story, they could participate, like Alisa said, like everything that was, people were watching it in a different way and sharing it in a different way with TikTok and, all the streaming that was happening. So I just love the fact that it like was this, big, huge success. And to me, that is why they won, is because the whole thing sort of came off, especially because leading up to it, you weren't so sure.
Jacie, your take on the Olympics.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree with everything that's been said. This Olympics felt so special. It felt like something that the world just needed. I totally agree. The lead up to it was I think everybody who, especially working in sports, is a little nervous for how it's all going to play out, but it felt like it really brought the world and different countries together in ways that, again, we just really needed. I think, especially for us from a kind of like new fan, female fan, underserved fan perspective, like the Olympics is just the perfect place for anyone to fall in love with sports. Everyone's on that more level playing field. I think that there's a lot of the time you're seeing a sport for the first time and understanding the judging or the technicalities of it alongside somebody else who also doesn't know. And so for us at the Gist, just that like everyone's learning together and experiencing it together. Kind of falling in love with new sports, new athletes is really part of the magic of the Olympics. And it felt like that was just really well harnessed this year in Paris in particular. I think a personal, just like favorite moment from a purely fan perspective was just everything to do with Simone Biles. I think just seeing everything that she's been through and, like the past few games, like they're not that far away, but how quickly we forget everything that she'd really been through, all the hate that she received. I think seeing her kind of come back from that and perform in the way that she did was honestly just incredibly inspiring. I'm absolutely obsessed with her, and I just think she's such a tremendous role model, not just to little girls, but just for everyone as well. And I think she's the epitome of also just the power of some of these female athletes and how they're really transcending sport, and I think really pushing culture forward, and again are really role models in our society. And so that was a big fan moment for me personally.
I love that. And I love what all of you brought to that question. And I think, one theme that sort of ran through each of your answers, as different as they were, was how it brought us together. And I think this Olympics really did a wonderful job of creating that sense of connection as a society overall, and then with the people who are participating on the ground in Paris. I want to switch gears for a minute and really hone in on the brand perspective. I already mentioned some of the brands like Louis Vuitton and Charmin, Ralph Lauren and Skims that really seem to shine in and around the games. I know, Pallavi, you've been spending some time in the classroom talking about what some of the brands have done, analyzing with your students. So what have you seen?
So in terms of, the overall picture, right? I think, so Louis Vuitton, I think for me was personally, I thought it was a really wonderful brand part. I know there was a lot of hate on, that they kind of overtook the games. Some people felt like they were too much. It wasn't fitting with the spirit. But to me, I took sort of a broader look at the whole thing. One is that that's not going to go away. I mean, when you're looking to head to LA, there is going to be that level of sponsorship. Like, I think once the genie's out of the bottle, something I read in an article about it, and I think that's definitely the case. But, Louis Vuitton is a luxury brand. You don't particularly think necessarily the Olympics is luxury brand territory, but obviously with Paris, it makes sense. It's the homegrown brand. And I also felt like that word luxury, like it fit with, like, it was such a luxury to be back in the Olympics in a crowded stadium and having people participate. So to me, like, it really did feel like a really just a great moment for that brand in terms of, the ceremony, the awards, the tray, the uniforms, it was very seamless. And, it's not like it was splashed like Louis everywhere. I mean, they're iconic enough that people kind of recognize it. So I personally, I didn't think it was overdone. And my class sort of agreed with that. They thought it was a really nice sort of, through line for the Olympics. But the other one that we really liked was at the very end. I mean, it was like the last day, right? And, the McDonald's, and, you had the basketball game and, the Golden State Warriors, and they just like won just by a hair. And that the McDonald's in France said, we're getting rid of curry sauce because it was, Stephen Curry. And, so those opportunistic moments that can't be planned when a brand just sort of takes hold of the moment and is like doing that, we love that in our class as well. So I love both of those.
Excellent examples. So Jacie, you've talked about how your role focuses on partnerships, and I know that Gist spends quite a bit of time focusing on partnerships and reporting on the business side of sports. I know you were on the ground in Paris. What's your take on the brand perspective here?
Yeah, there are a lot of really fun partnerships. I think we're in a place with just brands and sponsorships and marketing around the Olympics where there's such an opportunity to take kind of things to that next level. And I agree, like, I think the Louis Vuitton campaign, it was fun. It was like, I think that it's not too over the top, or I think the reality is that brands are going to be showing up. And so doing so in an authentic and fun way is part of the magic of sports again. And so I'm so glad you brought up the McDonald's example too. I agree. I think that those brands that have been able to be really like capitalize on these timely cultural moments is really hard to do. I think we've worked with a few partners on that kind of campaign, and it's very hard to jump on and to know the right tone, and if it's going to be a flash in the pan and a viral TikTok thing, or if it's going to have kind of an everlasting message. But I thought the McDonald's example with Curry was really well done. Some of the other partnerships that and kind of brands that showed up that I thought in really unique ways, I do have to call out Nike. Nike's one of our biggest partners, but the way that they were really able to, sorry, excuse me, to activate their athletes, and I think to zero in on some of the specific sports, like Nike to me and for many fans and just athletes is synonymous with track. And I think that they really did a great job at, again, activating their athletes in those specific sports and being part of the Olympic experience pre, during, and post, and really telling those athletes stories. But it didn't feel like it was all concentrated around the games and the athletes' performance specifically. It was much more year round. I think there was a really good build up to it. Like they were all over trials and like just making sure that some of those storylines were fed and were really amplified and really had a lot of just like the proper storytelling leading into the games that made Nike really pop. It felt like when some of those athletes were doing super well and when they weren't too, like I think that human element behind what makes the Olympics so special was certainly there. Nike has done a great job with that. The other one that I have to mention is Netflix. I think that, and in different ways, but I've already been talking about Simone Biles, but Simone Biles Rising was just amazing. And I think their timing and promotion of it was right. I am biased because we do work with Netflix and we did specifically work on the Simone Biles Rising documentary. But I think, again, capitalizing on the moment, getting the timing right is so important in sports. You just don't know what's going to happen. And so sometimes you do need to take that bet on how something's going to play out. And I think Netflix and the Simone Biles doc was a really great example of that. And of course, Netflix has done this with other sports, whether it's Drive to Survive in F1 or Breakpoint in tennis. But so there is this kind of broader movement around those docu-series around sports. But I thought particularly with Simone Biles and just, again, really the proper lead up to it felt like it was done really well. And it really resonated with a lot of new fans too, that didn't know the full story and kind of like what that context was for Simone as well. So yeah, I thought Netflix did an interesting job. One other one that I wanted to call out that's not necessarily, I think, as big or splashy or maybe endemic to sports is QuickBooks. I don't know if some of those on the call saw some of their content, but like just an example of a sponsor really showing up in, again, fun, kind of cheeky ways. They had like these small business hurdles and just generally not taking themselves and the brand super seriously, but tying into sports in a really fun way. They're another one that I thought did a great job, and it wasn't super high budget and super splashy, but was just fun content.
Awesome. Well, those are some great examples. Thank you, Jacie. Alisa, I know, you sort of have the brand lens on at all times. So I'm just sort of curious, who did you think, got it right in Paris and why?
Well, first, I'll just say, Jacie, I loved some of your comments around enjoying a new sport. So my new sport that I enjoyed this time, it was judo. I don't think I've ever watched judo before, but I was like literally wringing my hands like this with intensity watching judo, trying to understand, like getting my head around this sport. So I love that you brought that up because I think that was such a big part of the experience. I thought about that there are really two, and these are probably more of a traditional view, but first and foremost, I think NBC did a really good job sort of reimagining how they wanted to do this. I think in the past, the way they've showed up is very corporate, a little bit cold, a lot of expertise. And I think there were a couple things. I mean, and obviously what they did worked. Viewership was through the roof, and they enabled viewing through both traditional channels and through Peacock and through their multimedia view so that you could see multiple screens at the same time, which is, let's be honest, everybody wants to be able to not miss any of the sports. So I give them a lot of credit. And then the second piece is, I think they added some humor to the mix. They had Snoop. So Snoop was, a bit of an iconic. So when you say, I think we were already thinking about LA, we were dropping seeds of Los Angeles the day the Olympics kicked off, I think, with Snoop. And he's just such an interesting, yes, he is an artist, but he's become a bit of an everyman that is so approachable. He is funny, he is curious, and I think you put him in places with athletes where he doesn't exactly know what's happening, but he brings the curiosity that we all have in a way that's really relevant. So I personally got a real kick out of that. And then the second one, I always like to see how, the OGs show up every single Olympics. So you've got, like, if I don't see an Omega clock during the Olympics, I feel like it's probably not the Olympics. But in the case of some of the OGs, I look at Procter and Gamble this year that had to really think about how they were going to show up. They were a true partner across the board. I think they really were bigger contributors to Olympic Village. And so because of what I stated before, now we have more visibility into how they're supporting the athletes. They had a salon, they had, a dentist's office. And most importantly, this year, I think in partnership with Allison Felix, who is, a completely amazing, track and field Olympic medalist, in partnership with her, they created the Pampers daycare center for women that needed a place to go and breastfeed and have some time with their kids. And to me, that's a really special piece of what we want to celebrate in the Olympics is most of these folks are not career athletes. They are our neighbors, they're our friends, they are people in the community, and their moms, and aunts and uncles, just like any of us. So I just thought that was a really great way for Procter and Gamble to show up. And I think their message around sustainability, I think that's a bigger message around the Olympics and thinking about that. And I appreciate that they're really trying to help take that stand forward.
That's awesome. So we're going to move in one quick second to a conversation around sort of the numbers about Paris, but I'm going to pose a question to you all. And I knew this conversation was going to have more than we could fit into an hour. So I'm just going to ask you to sort of give me your yes, no, thumbs up, thumbs down on this one. But I want to get your take on whether you think being a formal Olympic sponsor is worth it for a brand, or can brands who are not official sponsors still capture some value and some of the magic by leaning into the games in more informal ways. So just sort of a yes, no, if you will. Jacie, let's start with you. What do you think?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Absolutely is really the answer here. I think half of our partners were official partners, the other half weren't. You have to do it in the right ways. You have to follow all of the rules and really understand them. But like some of our partners had an amazing Olympic Games because of activating around the games, but not being an official partner, but doing so in the right ways. Yes, I think absolutely.
Great. Pallavi, what do you think?
Definitely, but I'll put a caveat on that, right? Like if you're a big brand that, as you said, like you expect to see you there, you do want to see them be there in a significant way. So, in a way, like don't cheap out if you're a brand that normally spends on the Olympics and is trying to profit off of this small little thing. I think if you're a smaller brand, a newer brand, a brand that people don't know as well, that's where you kind of swoop in. But if you're like a Coca-Cola or something like that, like you got to be there in a big way, and you have to also support the Olympics, right? You don't get this whole like brand, affinity if you're not spending some money to support the games.
Fair point. Alisa, where do you land on this question?
I say yes to both because technically it was two questions. I say yes to both. I think my caveat is the most important thing is to keep, even if you are sponsoring the Olympics, you have to keep your core customer in the center of your lens in terms of your why and what is your relevance in being involved with the Olympics as it relates to your customer. So I think as long as you're thinking about how to activate and how to enable it, whether you're inserting yourself as part of culture or you're a bigger brand sponsor, I think you always have to stay true to who you are as a brand.
Excellent point. All right, we're going to switch gears for a minute And I want to spend a little bit of time taking a look back at Paris from the standpoint of data. Now, we ran a special Olympic edition of our proprietary Brandgeist IQ product and saw some really interesting results. And for those of you who don't know what Brandgeist IQ is, it's an award-winning AI-powered methodology designed to measure the real-time cultural relevance of brands. And there are 5 indicators of cultural relevance that we look at when putting together a brand's overall BGIQ score. We looked at how plugged into pop culture a brand is. We looked at how disruptive they are, both in the products they bring to market and in how they market. We look at whether they are a brand that lives with purpose and inspires others along that journey, how inclusive they are, and also how they show up both from a look, feel, and tone of voice. Is it modern and on trend? So as I said, we ran a Special Olympics poll looking at 21 Olympic sponsors. And as we headed into the games, we saw 38% of brands increase their overall BGIQ score. Now, it was interesting. We've talked a lot about Louis Vuitton. So they were at the top spot heading into the Olympics, but it is possible that they peaked a little early with all the fanfare around the opening ceremony because things shifted as we got into the thick of the games. So early on, we saw big gains from Delta, Oakley, and Samsung, with their increases in cultural relevance driven for all 3 by their plugged into pop culture score, their living with purpose score, and their disrupting the norm score. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And then you had Airbnb. And Airbnb had a very strong plugged into pop culture score leading into the games, and then they shot to the top overall. I think probably everyone is familiar with the campaign they launched, the Icons campaign, where consumers had the opportunity or the chance to stay in an iconic pop culture oriented spaces like the Musée d'Orsay or the house from the movie Up. All of that dominated the zeitgeist. And so while Airbnb had the highest score overall, we also saw big gains from brands like Michelob Ultra, P&G, which we've just talked about, and Nike, which we also talked about, as they put their sponsorship dollars to work. And I do think the swooping in by P&G of Kendall Ellis sponsorship after the porta potty mishap really was just brilliant. So I just wanted to get your guys' take. We'll spend just a few minutes reflecting back on the data that I just walked through. Pallavi, any reactions to what I've just shared? And we'll spend just a few minutes more here because I do want to leave time to get to LA. There's a lot to talk about going forward.
Exactly. I mean, I think that, it's fascinating when you look at those 5 measures that you're looking at. And I think, a lot of them have what makes a brand successful. People want to be part of the conversation, right? So if you look at all those things like pop culture and modern and things like that, that's what allows people to participate. And so to me, when brands can capture that, that's great. But I did notice the inclusivity was down for a lot of brands. So if you're looking ahead to LA again, I mean, that's only going to become more of a value for people as we become a more diverse country. So that's something where I think brands, it looks like they didn't do as good of a job. And there's an opportunity there to really own that space a little bit more.
Excellent, excellent. Alisa, thoughts?
No, I think I'll just play off of that. I think as we move this conversation, as the Olympics move into LA, we are such a diverse community in LA, and the inclusive piece will have to be at the forefront of that, in my mind, in order for this to be authentic and real to LA and to host an Olympics that truly embraces, everyone. I think, as you're Paris, I think there is a little bit of a luster that goes along with Paris. And so that's where Louis Vuitton sort of made a lot of sense. I think for LA, we have to think a little bit more about not so much, and I'm sure everybody's thinking about this, but there is sort of the Hollywood and celebrity side, but there are other deep roots and deep history in our city that I am hoping that we celebrate in a pretty big way as well. So I think finding that balance will be important.
I think that's such a great point. And I'll be really excited to see what happens as we get closer to LA 28. Jacie, any last minute thoughts before we shift gears?
Yeah, I love this. I think the reality of where sports and the Olympics are going is that we need to reach that next generation of fans. And so that's millennial, Gen Z fans. And this is what they care about. I think these metrics really show it's like you have to be tuned into pop culture to have any chance of engaging with that younger fan, that younger demo. And I'm so glad everyone's been bringing up the inclusivity piece, because that's what Gen Z fans care about. And so if you aren't already thinking about that, then you're behind, frankly. And so, yeah, I'm like, I need to get my hands on some of these slides after.
Well, you have a connection.
Great.
There we go. All right, let's switch gears, head over to the West Coast where our friend Alisa is. Oh, sorry, Sam, we can keep going. And we'll start talking about LA 28 and what marketers need to think about. And I mentioned already that it felt like LA 28 started before Paris even finished or closed the books on it. And I don't think we're going to see that let up. And Jacie, it was really interesting. You started talking about Netflix as a brand and how they showed up. But I think what's really interesting is how the IOC is leaning into what Netflix is doing.
Mm-hmm.
So the IOC is absolutely taking a page from like Formula One and the NFL and getting into the sports documentary space. They had already run season 1 of Sprint, which is a docuseries about track and field athletes. And they were actually filming during and around Paris before and during the games. And that's just one of 3 series the IOC has in partnership with Netflix. You mentioned Simone Biles Rising. That is another one that is in current rotation. It has been in the Netflix top 10 position for quite some time. And they're also working on another series focusing on the US Olympics men's basketball team. So very similar to Formula One Drive to Survive and the NFL's Hard Knocks series, the IOC is leveraging an entertainment platform to ensure that the Olympic brand remains relevant in between games. We're looking at 4 years. And I think the point here is that the IOC's own activity to keep the summer games sort of top of mind and LA's hype machine means that brands have a multi-year opportunity, sort of a wave that they can ride as we look to the shores of Southern California for 2028. So, Alisa, I want to start with you. Sprouts has a huge presence in Southern California, and I know you're coming to us live from Los Angeles today. But it's a brand with retail skin in the game in the geography of LA 28. What should other brands in similar situations be thinking about?
Well, I think there's a couple things. I think if we, first of all, so we think about the next 4 years, Los Angeles is going to be going through a pretty big transformation. I think if you read some of the articles, we are looking to try and, you know, really do a great job making this a highly sustainable Olympics. And so I know there's a lot of beautification projects around the city that are being developed. There's a lot of projects that are being developed around transportation. I think, because of the pandemic, I think LA has taken some setbacks in terms of how we've grown as a city and an environment. And similar to how you might set a goal for yourself, a home project like, hey, I want to get my home looking great because I have to host Thanksgiving at the end of the year. I feel like there are some really big opportunities just in terms of beautifying the city and thinking about how we all take a role in how we all want to show up together as a community. So I think that's number one. I know for Sprouts, we do have a pretty big footprint in Southern California. And if I think about for us, the connectivity between helping people live and eat better and what that means for performance, whether it's for athletes or even for the folks that just want to live a healthier lifestyle, we believe there is some really great opportunities for us to think about how we're going to show up during the Olympics. Obviously, there's going to be an influx of a lot of new faces coming into the city. And, I think we'll just be thinking about how we show up as a brand to help, support our customers and our new customers that are going to be coming in. But my guess is the preparation of LA as a city and thinking about the Olympics should probably be at the forefront of brands' minds as they think about being an integral partner in the event.
I love that. Jacie, what is the GIST sort of thinking about when it comes to brand partnerships leading into LA, both, editorial, paid side, where do you see it going?
Yeah, we're so excited for LA 28. I think it's just it's going to be absolutely huge. We have a large following in California as well. So it's going to be, yeah, it's just, there's already so much hype around it. I think in the women's sports world in particular, it's going to be at a whole other level in 4 years than it is even today. From an editorial perspective, yeah, we'll be going honestly very big. We're a startup, like we're still in our very early days, so we don't have some of the huge budgets, some of those linear eyeballs that an NBC has, but we drove over 100 million impressions across our organic content for the Paris games. And so if that's any indication, it's like the LA games are just going to be absolutely huge for us and so many others in a kind of similar space. We'll definitely be leaning into really fan first, culture forward coverage. And I will say that female athletes are going to be at the center of it. 74% of our engagement from the Paris Games came from stories about female athletes. Jordan Childs, like Ilona Mayer, of course, the US women's national team on the soccer side. Like
Isn't that great to
many
see?
amazing
That's so
storylines.
great to see.
So great to see. Yeah,
So
it's fantastic. Like we're all about equal coverage, but sometimes the way women's sports are popping off is like we've got to lean into it. So that will be really core to what we're building out. Another piece from both an editorial and paid's perspective is that kind of gamification side. So we see so much interest in brackets, fantasy, sports betting, even down the line, around sports in general with our fans. And so we'll definitely be leaning into that as we get into LA. For the women's soccer tournament for Paris, we ran a bracket that just went off. Gisters want to be gaming around their sports engagement. So it's a really great way to drive fandom to that kind of next level. I'll also touch on, like, we have a partnership with NBC that's focused on female collegiate athletes. And so in 4 years, some of those athletes are going to be in the Olympics. And so obviously NBC being the official broadcaster, there's a lot of momentum and groundwork that we're laying right now as we head into this 4-year stretch. And I know we talked about some of the storytelling around some of these athletes that Netflix is doing. I think there's a tremendous opportunity with some of the talent that's going to be coming up, whether that's from they're going to be competing in the Olympics or they're going to be the next influencers and kind of culture creators in 4 years. Like we've seen an Angel Reese, we've seen Caitlin Clark. There's so many other female collegiate athletes that are going to be really influential in a few years. And so we're partnering with NBC to really bring that to life and lay the groundwork today so that in 4 years, we're really well positioned to, again, put those female athletes at the center of our content. And then from a paid perspective, it really won't look that different. Our partners are always interested in just being part of our storytelling. Of course, many of them are interested in working with us around female athletes, women's sports. I think particularly with some of our partners on the paid side, we'll be doing some more experiential activations, viewing parties, and really bringing fans together. And that kind of safe space is just a natural extension of the Gist brand as well. So for Paris, for instance, we sent 10 Gisters to a VIP experience to Paris. They were like first class flights. They got to attend all these amazing events. And so we'll do something along those lines, if not even bigger for LA for sure. So just that kind of experiential activation side of things is going to be really fun for LA 28.
Awesome. And Pallavi, when you think about brands and brands getting engaged sort of early on or leaning in early on, what do you think they need to be thinking about?
So we talked this week in class about the super fan, right? Like the concept of the super fan. And I know like there are a lot of brands that have sort of super fans around their products, like candy companies, a lot come to mind. But in class, we talked about the fact that when you think of yourself as a super fan, you think of it like for a band or for, a sport or something along those lines, like a passion, right? So for me, that's where brands can really start now, is building the super fan around particular sports. And I know we're going to talk in a second about some of the new sports that are going to be part of the LA Games. And if you're a brand and you want to, you know, cultivate, you know, women's rugby or like men's lacrosse and these newer sports, that's where you should really be starting, because that's the, you know, 4 years is still a long time. It's not too early, absolutely, to talk about it, but you don't want to have fatigue among your consumers. So when you're building that super fan base, especially like at the, you know, high school level, maybe the alphas will be ready by then, who knows? But, you know, the Gen Zs and those people, I think that's where brands should really be looking right now and cultivating it, you know, and like Jacie said, like cultivating on gaming platforms, thinking ahead on, you know, what like the technology part of this is also really important when you're thinking about how you're going to build this fan base, because it's obviously not going to be, you know, the technology necessarily that we're even using right now. And so thinking about that is really, I think, where the excitement is, but also they're going to have to do a little bit of homework in order to be successful at that effort.
I couldn't agree with you more, and thank you for the perfect setup to my last question as we sort of round out today's discussion. And I do want to spend a few minutes talking about the opportunities for brands who might be looking to spend money in particular sports, especially sports that are reflected in Olympic competition. And at Allison, we have a sports specialty called Allison Sports, and we spend a lot of time talking about the rise in popularity of what I would consider to be emerging sports and around sort of this explosive growth in women's sports. So I'm going to just focus in on two examples of sports in this category. The first one that I put in the emerging category is lacrosse, professional lacrosse. And I mention it because it's going to make its Olympic debut in LA 2028. And so just like breaking and skateboarding, it's going to get a lot of attention. I think one of the really good things here is that there are leagues like Paul Rabel's Premier Lacrosse League that are up and running and are quickly growing in popularity. I believe they just had their championship tournament in Philly like a few weeks ago. It was a huge success. And then the second sport is women's rugby. And I don't mean to be offensive, but you'd really have to be living under a rock if you don't know the name Alona Mar from the Paris Games. And with her Instagram followers and sort of power and her Sports Illustrated cover story, she's quickly become the very public face of a sport many had no idea was part of the Olympics, let alone in the US. So I think this presents huge opportunities for brands. And Jacie, I do want to start with you here. I know, you know, the gist is all about equal coverage of men's and women's sports. And these are two sports that I think we can all agree we see growing in popularity, yet at a price point, like an entry point for partnership that's much lower than like the NBA or the WNBA. So, you know, what are you seeing when it comes to sports that are like on the cusp?
Yeah, I'm so glad you called these two sports in particular out, because I totally agree. I think it's no surprise. We love women's rugby at the GIST. And I think what Alona Mar has done too is the perfect example of a female athlete driving fandom, interest, culture towards an emerging sport. And so very excited for what's going to happen with rugby. I will call out the Women's Elite Rugby League, first women's pro league. There was only a semi-pro league before. But it's launching in 2025. And so brands that want to be part of this women's sports movement with that lower price tag in an emerging sport should definitely be paying attention to some of these athletes, some of these leagues that are coming up and really professionalizing as we get into LA 28. And I think the Women's Elite Rugby League is definitely one to just be keeping an eye out for. That's going to be launching next year. And then lacrosse is another great example. Athletes Unlimited Pro Lacrosse is amazing. We've been covering it in the GIST. My prediction is definitely that it's going to kind of pop off in LA, if not beforehand, in a very similar way that women's rugby has. There are some amazing athletes playing pro lacrosse. And so another one to definitely pay attention to. A few others I'll call out are, and I know this is focused on LA and summer sports, but the PWHL Professional Women's Hockey League, you know, the US women's hockey team is amazing. There's going to be a lot of chatter around women's hockey as we're getting into the winter games as well. So that's one that I would definitely flag for some of the marketers in the room that are looking at some of those lower price tags again, but getting into women's sports. Volleyball is another really big one to be paying attention to. And I mentioned it before, but it is women's collegiate sports. and athletes that's where the pipeline is being built. And so just taking a look at some of those sports and those athletes, I think is really prudent as well. And one thing I will call out for some of these more emerging sports and leagues is that there isn't going to be those kinds of eyeballs and level of just kind of broadcast viewership or linear buys. Like it is a different buy. It's a different sport. It's in a different place. But what I want to kind of touch on is that this next generation of sports fans are often not watching the broadcast, especially not with some of these emerging sports. Like they're very hard to access. They're getting into a rugby or lacrosse or volleyball even through athletes, through influencers, through digital content like the Gist. I will say, like 77% of our Gisters come to the Gist for all of their sports content. So before they're going to an ESPN and watching the actual broadcast. And so that kind of next generation of fans that's going to have a lot of spending power by 2028 and the LA games, there's a lot of opportunities to invest in digital and some of these more non-traditional buys around some of these emerging sports that have hyper high engagement and is really like, I think that the next generation of fans sees who's placing those bets and kind of investing authentically in some of these athletes, in some of these emerging sports from the early days too, before they're reaching that kind of mainstream level. So that's what we know Gen Z fans are paying attention to. So it's something to just kind of keep in mind as we're looking at some of the different price tags out there as well.
I think that's great. And you sort of set me up for a question both for Alisa and for Pallavi. Actually, Alisa, I want to go to you first. I know you do a ton of work with in the NIL space and collegiate athletes. And so when you think about a brand like Sprouts, would you consider getting into one of these emerging sports as part of an overall Olympic strategy? Is that something that's even on the radar?
I think listen, anything is possible as we continue to develop our Powered by Sprouts platform. I think for us, to your point, we've done over 150 NIL deals for up and coming female athletes. And it's just because we believe that this is the space where we want to make sure that we are empowering women and supporting the women at this level to enable them to keep going into a bigger level. We think that this is a great place for that. Second, I also think to that end it is also about partnering with NILs and these athletes that have a connection to the communities where we do business. That is a big piece of this is, finding athletes where we want to support them, but that they know us, they know the Sprouts brand, they love to, engage with us, they are a customer for us. And I think a great example of this is we just recently, did a deal with Lori Hernandez, who is a former, Olympic gold medalist. And the reason why we started working with her was not because of the Olympics, it was because she's like a hometown hero in Aberdeen, New Jersey, where we opened a store. And so this is where we find that connectivity I talked about in terms of really focusing on our customer and creating those connections with our brand, with our customers, and with our initiative to take things forward. So, is there a possibility that we would sponsor lacrosse? Maybe. I'll be honest, lacrosse, I can't believe the popularity of lacrosse these days. I have many nieces and nephews that are deep in this sport, and it really is an extraordinary sport to watch. But I think for us, it is a little less about the sport itself. It is finding either the people or the brands or the companies that we want to align with. I think another good example I would use is we are currently a sponsor with Angel City in Southern California. And part of the reason why we partner with them is just the values that Angel City stands for in terms of how they treat their team, how they've built up their organization is very much in line with who we are as a brand as well. And so finding those connectors to me is probably the most important part so that we can be really authentic about how we're showing up with our partnerships.
That's excellent. And Pallavi, I know you already touched upon like the importance of leaning into these emerging sports. Is there anything else you would add that brands should think about as they have sort of this time period between games?
Yeah. So, the one thing I think we haven't touched on is the fact that the LA Games is the first time, when we talked about this before, Lisa, that since Atlanta, right, that it's in the US. And so I think if you're an American brand, I really think there's a huge opportunity to really start to, to build into that. And I think, 2026 is I don't know if I'm saying this or not correctly or not, the semi-centennial of the US. It's a very patriotic moment, the 250th anniversary of America. And it's a halfway point to the LA Games, which is the first time in 30 years that, they're going to be back in the US. So if you're like a Ralph Lauren or like, a McDonald's or a Coca-Cola, there is sort of this opportunity to really support a US Olympic athlete. And, also obviously play on to the fact that, it's going to be a very patriotic moment in 2026 in Philadelphia, where the celebration is going to be. So I don't know if there's something, I mean, Lisa and I were joking that Casey Wasserman should hire us because we have all the good ideas, but I do feel like there's something, I think there is something there that really could be amazing as you're sort of building into that. So again, if you're an American brand and there's a sport, emerging sport, I don't know, it could be a perfect, partnership that's, hasn't been realized yet. And I will just add that, and I also said this before, if Miley Cyrus is not like hopping off the plane at LAX, singing Party in the USA, wearing a cardigan, maybe by J. Crew, I don't know, but like that's a perfect brand moment to open up the Olympics as well. So
I love that.
I had to put that out there into the universe.
I think thinking about 2026 as the halfway point is very interesting. And I'm going to leave our audience with that as the end to our sort of formal conversation. And I really want to thank all three of you for such thoughtful and insightful answers to the questions and a great conversation. We are almost at the bottom of the hour, so I really appreciate you spending the time with us. I hope you had a great look back at the splendor that was Paris and sort of a tantalizing taste of what will be LA. Please feel free to reach out if you want to learn more about Allison Sports or Brandgeist IQ. And I hope you'll follow me on LinkedIn and subscribe to The Roar for a bi-weekly dose of consumer brand marketing news, opinions, and trends. So thank you, everyone, and we will see you soon.